Hi, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Justin Leopard with Consordini.com, here today with another cello lesson for you guys. Today we're going to talk about tuning the cello. So if you've been following us, you've already learned how to make sure your cello is set up, how to kind of get started with it. Today we want to go a little bit deeper into how to tune the strings. This isn't going to solve every intonation problem that you have with the left hand, but we just want to make sure that our starting place is as good as possible. So just a quick recap in case some of this information isn't obvious or is just new. Each string is kind of its own mini instrument on this bigger instrument. They each carry their own vibrations that resonate through the bridge and through the cello. So what that means is that you kind of are accountable for playing 4 different things. If you play with a bunch of different fingerings on one string, only one of those notes is going to speak at a time. But conversely, if you switch strings, that string wasn't necessarily vibrating that much to begin with, and so it's kind of like starting a new thing. So this is the importance of tuning the strings, because one of them could be out, and the instrument overall is out of tune, even though it was just one string. So there's kind of 2 things to talk about when it comes to tuning. One is tuning within the instrument, and the second is tuning to a reference. So I kind of actually want to start with just tuning to the instrument, because I think this is, in some ways, the more difficult of the 2. So first I'm just going to kind of mess up my strings a little bit so they're out of tune. And if your strings aren't already strung up and generally at the right pitch, then definitely watch the other video on stringing up the cello. But I just want to talk about tuning relative to the instrument. So I'm not actually going to tune the A string at all right now. I'm just going to tune the other strings to it. And this is how we tune. If you ever get into an orchestra situation, there's going to be an oboe giving the orchestra an A. You tune to that A, and then you're responsible for tuning the other strings. And the way that we do this is by listening for the sympathetic resonance of the strings. So cello strings are tuned a 5th apart each. And a 5th is defined as a musical ratio of 3 against 2. And this is vibrations per second. So if you looked at the frequency of A versus the frequency of G, if they're perfectly in tune, they're going to form this perfect mathematical ratio. And this is something that you can hear. So right now when I play these 2 strings, you're probably going to hear some sort of dissonance, some sort of other rhythm that's going on while I'm playing the strings. So if you listen, you can hear this. That's the tempo. Right? So the reason that's happening is that if you picture the waveforms going in front of you, then if it's 3 against 2, then every 6 times for one, they're going to meet up together. They're not always going to be off. Every time they meet up together adds to silence. And so the ear will actually end up hearing this implied other wave going on that's lower than either of the 2 notes. This is a little bit theoretical, but this is the reason why if it's perfectly in tune, you're not going to hear these wobbles. You're just going to hear the intonation itself. So let's work on how to know whether to tune up or down. Well, let's say that I have no idea, and I have no idea whether the D string is sharp or flat. Let's try just going a little bit in one direction or another. We're using fine tuners, so this poses no risk. So right now I tune flatter, and that's all I need to remember, is if you tune counterclockwise, you go flat. If you screw in the screw, it's going to go sharper. So right now I made it flatter by unscrewing. That is not more in tune, so I went the wrong direction. I still hear that wobbling in the sound, so let's try tuning up a little bit more. I still hear wobbling. Woo, 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 is the tempo I hear. See if you can really listen for it. And that's not my hand being shaky. That's just what's happening with these strings right now. So we have to get a little closer. That's a lot better. In fact, I only heard one aberrant vibration in that whole thing, which means that we're so close that the aberration occurs very far apart. Again, if you picture the waveforms of these notes. So I'm just going to click it up a little more. Okay, so now those strings are in tune. Let's do the next two in the same fashion. Great. Now let's go to the last two. So that's pretty off, right? Maybe you can already hear it's kind of off in the same way that these two strings started off often, which is how you can start paying attention to, I know that this string is flat because I remember what that sounds like to be extra wide. Still just a very faint wobble. We got very close with that one, probably because I'm familiar with this. Okay, so I think this is probably a little bit of a learning curve to be able to listen for these resonances. And there's two other things I want to talk about when it comes to tuning. And yes, tuning takes a while. Once you've started getting your bow hole down and you've started to try to make your sound production, a great way to practice it and be practicing something else is just to work on tuning, because you also have to work on a good tone. If I play with a bad tone, I honestly can't even tell if those are in tune or not. So you have to start by working on your sound production, but it can make it more fun if you're also working on your tuning. A quick way to know how far apart you are is that there are two harmonics on each string that are the same pitch. So this can be like a quick and dirty way to get close. If you touch the halfway point of the higher string and a third of the way up on the lower string, they're the same. And you've heard, because we've tuned this now, those sound like the same pitch. The reason why it's halfway up here and a third of the way up here is because of that 3-to-2 relationship. So 1/2 hot here, 1/3 here is the same pitch. If you went 2/3 up, it's actually the same pitch again. And while it might be a little bit hard to see on camera, you'll actually always see the second harmonic, so the one that's going to be right here, vibrating. Here, let's see. See that? See how it's vibrating here, it's vibrating here, it's vibrating here, but then at the other harmonic point, it's not. Isn't that wild? So that's like a way to show visually some of this stuff that I've been talking about with vibrations that might seem a little bit theoretical. No, it's very, very literally what's happening with these strings. They're vibrating very, very fast, very many times per second, and it is our job as a cellist to control those vibrations in a way that's very pleasing. So one thing you might find, this is my second tip, is that after you've tuned, your strings you might go back to the A and D and they might not still quite be in tune. This is because the cello is very sensitive, and changes to the tension in the peg box or throughout can actually mean that by the time you're done tuning the lower strings, the tension has changed and the upper strings are out of tune. But if you just go through the process again, or maybe a third time, you're going to get it averaged out. Hey guys, for a quick transfer over, this is Justin at the computer now, and I'm going to show you how to use a keyboard in order to make sure that you can get your cello to the right notes. So there's just two things I need to teach you, and you're going to be able to do this. So the first thing I need to teach you is what the note A is, and it's this one right here. The way that you're always going to know it is that on the piano, there's groups of 2 keys, and there's groups of 3 black keys. Groups of 2 black keys, groups of 3 black keys. The A is always the white key in the middle of the group of 3, closest to the right. All right, might have sounded a little complicated the way I said it, but find the group of 3 black keys, and it's the white key furthest to the right in the middle. This is A. That's the first thing I needed to teach you. The second thing I need to teach you is how to match pitch with your cello. So right now my A is here. All right, so I have to find the pitch that's the same as that. It's not A. See how you can hear that's the same pitch because they're the most possible agreeable notes. It's just, they sound the same. So what I know is that it's this note, but I don't know whether it's down here or down here. So if the string hasn't popped, it's probably below. So what this means is I need to tune up that amount. So we're going to do that. And now let's compare that. Now they're the same note. Awesome. You might have to do this in case your fine tuners are tuned all the way in. Just unscrew them and find the notes with a keyboard and use your pegs to get it right. Okay, back outside. So this has been our video on tuning. Let us know if you have any questions in the comments. Once again, I'm Justin Leppard. You can check out my playing at Justin Leppard Cello. This has been a production with Consordini.com. We really appreciate you guys watching, and we look forward to seeing you guys in the next cello lesson.